was the first question. And I decided I wanted to sit down. I just wanted one shot at the end. But they thought the same that I used. And you got it. So they weren't stupid. It's like they said, it's messed up. But there are reasons now just to take a lot of the medical evidence to throw it out the window. Some of the ballistics to throw it out the window. If there'd been a trial, a lot of it might have been thrown out the window, and that's why there couldn't be a trial.
Well, they could have taken this stuff out. You just can't do that.
On this, the anniversary of the 35th anniversary of the death of John F. Kennedy, it is most appropriate that we are here at the memorial, not at the scene of his death, but at the scene of his living memory. Most of you know Beverly Oliver, one of our most treasured close friends. She will begin our memorial ceremony.
Thank you. And I always feel very honored to be a part of JFK Lancer and what they do, because they always do it first class, and they've done a tremendous job this year, and we just thank all of you from the bottom of our hearts. Most of the time when I sing at these, I sing the Star Spangled Banner that they have asked me today to sing, my favorite, and I hope it's many of your favorites, Amazing Grace.
It's amazing, so amazing, it's amazing, so amazing.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. His grace has brought me safe thus far. His grace will lead me on. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we know that day to sing God's praise. And when we first begun,
It's amazing, so amazing, it's amazing, so amazing.
Amazing grace.
We have gathered here where the frightening sound of the gunfire could be heard. to memorialize the 35th anniversary of the sacrifice of John F. Kennedy in Dallas on November 22nd, 1963, and again now in 1998. But we are gathered here not just to remember a murder. We're here to memorialize a man, to comprehend his life, to understand his death, and to celebrate its enduring meaning. John Fitzgerald Kennedy was a president of great promise. Despite those who have said he did not fulfill those promises, we know that his brief 1,000 days were filled not simply with promise, but with accomplishments, some of them stirring and long-lasting. John F. Kennedy and his brother embraced the cause of civil rights, joined forces with Martin Luther King, repaired Soviet-U.S. relations, signaled that peace would be a key issue in his '64 election campaign, established for the first time significant nuclear arms control, reached out with real compassion to Latin America, began serious negotiations for better relations with Cuba, introduced real and major economic reforms to benefit all of the American people. He appreciated the best in both U.S. and world culture, and he became aware that any protracted Southeast Asian conflict had to be avoided. Until his death, JFK was examining fresh, new alternative ideas and fresh new options in the governance of the United States. But there were those who feared his future growth, and so he died on this day. But he will not have died in vain, if only because we have dedicated ourselves to the discovery of the truth about his death. We've come to understand how precious it is to preserve the memory of those we cherish and love, and whose life and death have not yet been fully and adequately explored. For that we have learned to value the truth in all of our history. We will settle for the truth and nothing less. That day the clock on the depository read 12:29, and the president's car turned a corner, and then turned again, and then came the awful noises, and then came the terrible loss and the terrible time. Let us remember him then, with just a moment of silence, for his spirit now moves among us. Thank you. Another very good friend, Roger Peterson.
Good afternoon. Why are we all here? After all, this was something that happened 35 years ago. Why? Because in every poll taken of the American public since 1964, a vast majority of Americans believe that the silliest conspiracy theory of all time is called the Warren Report. Just this week, a poll indicates that fully 73% of Americans believe that President Kennedy died as a result of a conspiracy. Only 18% believe Oswald did it alone. And when you reduce the Warren Report down to a one-on-one conversation, here's what the U.S. government told us in 1964. Americans, a lone nut with a poor self-image, decided to take out his frustrations, not on his dog, not on his neighbor, not on his wife, but the President of the United States who happened to be passing by his workplace that day. And further, the Warren Report claimed that 2 days later, by gosh, what a surprise, another lone nut came along, and in spite of his background in the mafia, and in spite of his sleazy businesses, Jack Ruby was hit with this sudden bolt of moralistic awakening that he had to keep Jackie from going to Lee Oswald's funeral. So Jack Ruby, the second lone nut, felt the moral need to kill the first lone nut. Y'all got that? Let's be real. The kind of plot lines of the Warren Report are what fiction publishers reject routinely as unbelievable, too simplistic, juvenile, and silly. The silliest of conspiracy theories then went a little further. The Warren Commission, feeling their oaths, then claimed, oh, by the way, these two lone nuts had nothing to do with each other, but we got to lock up all the information so you can't find anything out about them for 75 years and the fact that they didn't loan each other. Back in Minnesota, where I come from, we have an expression. Among the things that they locked up for 75 years, oddly, is Lee Oswald's income tax returns from the 1950s, and more oddly, his mother's income tax returns. That's something we really don't need to know for 75 years. And contrary to what you have heard from the defenders of the Warren Report, the evidence that's coming out of the Assassination Records Review Board's work is overwhelming, especially the medical evidence. It is no conspiracy theory at all that evidence now shows the autopsy team at Bethesda examined 2 brains, not 1, and the testimony of other witnesses, including the official photographer and 2 FBI agents, confirms that fact. It is not a conspiracy theory at all that the actual testimonies of 24 Bethesda autopsy team members each cited a massive exit wound in the back of Kennedy's head, not in the front. Your government altered the Bethesda testimonies in 1979 and concealed them until the JFK Records Act came along in '92 when we found the lies. Independent researchers, and by that I mean physicians, engineers, lawyers, not kooks, not buffs, not theorists, working with hard facts, not theories, had confirmed more. It's no conspiracy theory that Dr. David Mantic, a physicist and a radiologist, examined the x-rays of Kennedy's skull, and he is certain the x-rays were deliberately altered to show a 6.5 millimeter object that no one on the autopsy team ever saw, heard, or felt. It's no conspiracy at all that Dr. Randy Robertson, another radiologist, examined the skull fragments with the permission of the Kennedy family and concluded that Kennedy was hit twice in the head, almost simultaneously from the front and from the back. He's not a kook, he's a radiologist, that's an MD. While you have puzzled over this event and the silliness of the Warren Report, the truth about the Kennedy assassination has been a dirty little secret around Washington Beltway for many years. Why? Because the real story is in the cover-up of the assassination. For whatever reason, the government chose to do it. But we didn't believe their story then, and we don't believe it now. From 1963 until now, polls indicate Americans' confidence in the federal government has steadily declined. It happened right here in Dealey Plaza in 1963. We who are in the research community will not give up on this case. We're going to be here for the 40th anniversary. We're going to be here for the 50th anniversary. We're going to be here for the 75th anniversary. And then we're going to pass the torch to a new generation of Americans who will be here for the 100th anniversary. Our vigil will not end until some U.S. president, in some era, after receiving all the classified briefings handed down from one president to another, has the courage to say, we must be made whole, this record must be set straight. Then and only then, we will gather here for the last time, confident that we have done what any citizen in a democracy must do, defend justice. God bless the memory of President John Kennedy, and God bless America.
Thank you, Roger. Roger's one of the many people working toward the truth. Another friend of the truth who's just on the edge here is Gaetan Fonzi, one of the most remarkable investigators for the House Select Committee on Assassinations, who continues to establish the truth in the JFK assassination. Gaetan, would you come up, please?
Thank you. We are here today not only to commemorate the anniversary of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. We are here today to observe the anniversary of the planting of a seed. That seed grew into a giant oak of distrust that now darkens our view of government. In the history of our nation, no other single event has had as much a stultifying impact on our personal and national political psyche. The murderers of John F. Kennedy killed more than a president. They killed something deep in the very soul of this country. The innocent, untarnished belief naive perhaps, but gloriously, constantly self-fulfilling, that we are free-willed possessors of our own destiny. We believe, again naively perhaps, but absolutely essential to our national sense of well-being, that we as individuals had control of the process that permits us to select our leaders. We were absolutely certain that we had control of who governed us and how we were governed. We took that as the bedrock of any democracy. Now, those of you who are here, those of you who have been making the pilgrimage for 35 years, know that the assassination of President Kennedy produced cracks of historic implications in that bedrock of democracy. The democratic process is wedded to the concept that those who govern must do so under the laws and restraints that we who have elected them to govern have imposed. That concept was abrogated by the conspirators who killed President Kennedy. And those of you who are here, those of you who have been making the pilgrimage for 35 years, either physically or spiritually, those of you in this select group not only believe there was a conspiracy, you know there was a conspiracy. Because while most Americans believe there was a conspiracy, they don't know it. They don't want to know it. Because knowing it poses a responsibility. It poses a demand for action. And you have chosen to demand that government conform to the democratic process. That those who are elected caretakers of our government, adhere to the law and give priority, absolute priority, to the rule of that law, without secret hearings, without secrecy agreements, without the secret agenda of men who think their patriotism is superior to the democratic process. The men who killed President Kennedy came from the same seed as the men who were arrogant enough to lead us into Vietnam, to commit the illegalities of funding the guerrilla wars in Latin America, construct the deceptions and concealment of human rights abuses in so-called battles for democracy around the world. Imagine human rights abuses in the name of democracy. How far have we come from that Orwellian path since the Kennedy assassination? How far have we come from the basic purity, the basic innocence of that concept of democracy embodied in our Constitution? Much too far, I'm afraid. We have been taken too far by those powers who were involved in or acquiesced to the conspiracy to murder President Kennedy. I believe that those of us who are here today, those of us who know there was a conspiracy, have more than a responsibility. We have a mission. That mission is to lead all those Americans who believe there was a conspiracy into knowing there was a conspiracy. We have a responsibility to lead them into their own individual study of the facts, into their own individual analysis in order to recognize that there is indeed overwhelming evidence of conspiracy, and lead them to not rely on the government or the media for their conclusions. Both have lied to the American people for too long. I firmly believe that the future of this country depends on the majority of Americans going beyond believing there was a conspiracy to knowing there was a conspiracy. The future of the democratic process depends on it. The future of our individual freedom demands it. Thank you.
Last year at the 34th anniversary research conference, JFK conference, we had the great pleasure for the first time having a member of the Kennedy family join us in the conference, speak to us at the conference, and join us in trying to establish the truth in the assassination of John F. Kennedy, for she does not believe the official story. Before I introduce her, I want you to do something with all of us. I'd like you to join Carrie and all of us and walk through the memorial and touch it. I think it will be an incomparable memory. Join me in celebrating with her her memories and ideas and feelings about one of her favorite people and her cousin, John F. Kennedy, Karen McCarthy.
Thank you, George Michael, and thanks to all of you that are here today to remember Jack. Perhaps it's fitting that we're here in front of the memorial that the people of Dallas contributed to remember Jack. Many of you know that Philip Johnson, who was the architect of this memorial, designed it with a feeling that John F. Kennedy's memory would be in the center, unobserved by the city often, but with the top allowing his spirit to rise above the city. I'd like to think that Jack's spirit is here with us, as well as at the plaza. But for 35 years, thousands have paused in reflection to remember him, and thousands more come to Dallas to remember a man whose life touched ours. My cousin John Fitzgerald Kennedy was President of the United States, the 35th president to be honored to be allowed by this nation and trusted to lead. As a leader, he inherited a world not at peace with itself, yet not fully at war. Danger surrounded the American people, and John Kennedy learned quickly to transfer from a World War II hero who said very honestly, "I became a hero because they sunk my boat." But he became a Cold War warrior, aware of the tragic destiny that the war could bring to all countries of this world. His determination to grasp his role tested his abilities, and John Kennedy liked nothing more than to be tested. For a man who did not always enjoy good health, he became a great believer in the mind. His appreciation of intelligence and his admiration for ideas gave him the chance to use words. His words challenged America in the 60s. He urged participation. He stressed public service, and he renewed our belief in ourselves. His administration signaled a new beginning, one filled with hope, and his goals became ours. Or perhaps ours were his all the way along. When he died 35 years ago, our world did change. His death was perhaps the death knell of innocence for this nation, for our land to question how this could happen. We mourned him, and we mourned what could have been, perhaps more importantly than the man himself. For those who admire JFK, his loss has left a void, a deep emptiness, a pain that is still felt. In my youth, Jack Kennedy was the cousin who defined my family's success in just 3 generations in this country. He was one of the golden giants of my mother's youth. He was the godchild and the nephew that my grandmother adored. He was, to me, in the world of a child, glamour and fame and power. I dreamed someday of growing up just enough to be able to someday truly know him, to talk to him, to have him as friend as well as relative. But of course, fate did not allow that for me. That luxury was not mine, nor was it to be for his children, or his other nieces and nephews and younger cousins. But I know him. I know John Fitzgerald Kennedy from those who loved him, through his family members, his friends, his fellow office holders, who have all shared with me. And that is what we all do when we come here this weekend. We share John Fitzgerald Kennedy with one another. Those memories and stories are like an inheritance I have been given by those who truly knew him. To each of you, I share those memories because your hope to have someday known John F. Kennedy was no less keen than mine when I was a child. He exists in your hearts as well as mine, and that's a gift that we share with him. In your admiration and your remembrance of him, you pay him the highest of compliments. A life remembered is a high reward, and Jack knew that. In your memories of Jack, he lives, and in his finest deeds he will be judged, for he was a very human man. He was aware of his faults, and he accepted them, not always gracefully, but he had many gifts, and he shared all of those with us. His love of life, his joy in his children, his joy and delight in his family radiated in his warmth and his smile, and his humor was self-effacing many times. He also had a wit that was quick and sharp, and he knew that it was a gift he could count on. He dreamed of a world that would be safe for generations, not just of his family, but generations of your family. He took responsibilities for mistakes that he made, and he relished his growth as a human being and as president. He once said to the family, "I can't believe I can do this. I hoped I could, and now I find I can." How wonderful if each of us in our life finds that we can when perhaps we thought we couldn't. His loss 35 years ago was not just a historic focal point that brings us together, but rather it was a shameful and cowardly murder, not worthy of a man whose ending deserved more, for he was a man who lifted us towards the stars. His strength demanded that we reach out towards technology and to one another. He urged us to cross racial barriers, past political angers, and to go way beyond bigotry of geography or economic standards. He reminded us that weaponry destroys and balanced reason can save. He did not fit the standard of liberal or conservative, even though many have tried to label him. He believed each matter, each issue demanded thought and justification. He believed in destiny and raced headlong towards his own. We witnessed his strengths and his weaknesses and his triumphs, and we lived sadly through his greatest tragedy. His life was one of wealth and achievement and love, for he was loved, and perhaps today is still loved by millions who never even knew him. How honored he would be by that fact. In this city where his life ended, his ideas can still be felt. In the JFK Memorial that stands behind me at the 6th floor museum, even at Dealey Plaza, and in the minds of those at JFK Lancer. For here in Dallas were the faces that he saw last in his earthly voyage. Here in Dallas, the first tears were shed upon news of his death. And here in Dallas, the world began to cope with a death that was so senseless. We come here not to merely mourn, but fittingly to remember him, like the Celtic kings of his clans in past generations. It is more fitting to remember him with laughter, with pride, and with understanding. For in his sense of history, he would be pleased enough to know that he made a difference. His truth was ours, neither saint nor sinner. He was mortal, gifted yet imperfect, blessed and ultimately cursed. In our hearts, he was our own. And as such, let us pledge soon that we will find that his death will be viewed in terms of justice. A truth must one day be part of his epitaph. For now, let us be at peace that he was here with us, even for a short while, because like a beautiful sunrise gone quickly, he would want us to enjoy the rest of the day. His words guide us even today. He reminded us that the poet, the artist, the musician continue the quiet work of centuries, building bridges of experience between peoples, reminding mankind of the universality of feelings and desires and despairs, and reminding all that the forces that unite are deeper than those that divide. So as a member of his family, allow me to thank each of you today for caring and urge you to unite in a new spirit of hopefulness, for that is a tribute we can pay to a man who believed in us, a man who stated emphatically, we celebrate the past to awaken the future. So then today, in his memory, let us celebrate our past, including John F. Kennedy, and forge a path anew towards our own future, inspired by his spirit. Thank you all, and God bless.
Thank you, Carrie. Let us join together now with Carrie and touch the living spirit, the living memory, John F. Kennedy.
We, in fact, are not the free people that we want to be and that we have been and we should be as a nation. You know, it is a crime for a citizen of the United States to tell a lie to a federal investigator. That would be a crime. It is not a crime in this country for your government to lie to you. And we think that's an unfair kind of relationship that exists between us and our government. that if it's a crime for us to lie to our government, it should be a crime for our government to lie to us as well. And so it's in that spirit of investigation and of honest inquiry that our organization has worked. We worked very closely with the Federal Assassination Records Review Board to get materials out. They ran into an obstructive wall of secrecy at the federal agencies. They told us that they ran into a Cold War system of secrecy that refused to relent on the documents and information that are related to this event. And this was 30 years after the event, and a federal agency, a federal board that was set up by the Congress to try to get information released about what happened here today. And so we call on all of you to join us in our efforts. We think that great nations and civilizations cannot survive the kinds of doubt and turmoil that have been raised by the events that occurred here. If you study the history of great civilizations, you'll find that when they lost their way in terms of truth and in terms of their self-governance and their democracy and their republican institutions, then they began their decline and their ultimate collapse. And we do not want to be part of that type of effort for our country. We do not want decline and decay of our public institutions and our political system. We want to be part of a healthy revival of those democratic institutions and that democratic system. If you study the history of prior civilizations, you'll see this pattern very clearly. I think in many ways, and we believe that our nation has in fact suffered a decline in many of our public institutions and our democracy since 1963 and since these events. Today, a minority of our people even bother to vote. The largest turnout in an election in this country was in 1960, and it's been going down ever since 1960. These trends are very bad and they're very troubling, and so we ask you to join us in the effort that we have started to try to pursue the truth of these events, to try to pursue credibility and honesty and openness on behalf of our governmental institutions, and then by that effort to try to turn our nation in a direction, in a healthy direction, to build stronger democratic institutions, to build a stronger faith between the public and its government. And we think that that's essential, and we call on you as free citizens of this nation to join us in that effort. Now, I'm going to introduce to you a series of speakers who have been very involved in this issue and can give you the benefit of their experience as well. The first one will be Mark Lane. Mark Lane was one of the earliest researchers into this case. He did tremendous groundbreaking work and recorded much of his work for posterity, and Mark Lane has written on the assassination very extensively. And at this point, let me introduce to you Mark Lane.
I remember coming here almost 35 years ago, and there were no crowds on the grassy knoll, but now after all of these years, we'll literally have a museum over there on the 6th floor, which is a museum basically dedicated to a place where nothing happened. They don't have a plaque over here, and they should. 35 years ago, the fine newspaper in this city, the Dallas Morning News, published a full-page ad with the sarcastic heading, "Welcome to Dallas, Mr. President," and then went on to practically call him a communist and a traitor. That was the Dallas Morning News then. Today's Dallas Morning News is different editorial. Kennedy's legacy, the time is ripe for another surge of idealism. No references now to John Kennedy being a communist or a traitor. Now he's a great man. They'll tell us everything about John Kennedy, everything, except who killed him. Because look at the rest of the Dallas Morning News. 35 years later, when every survey in America shows that 75 to 95% of the American people are convinced that there was a conspiracy to kill John Kennedy. Here we go in the guise of a book review. Today's Dallas Morning News. Oswald alone killed Kennedy. Oswald alone killed Tippit. One man, two murders. They're still with the same story. I have but one word for the Dallas Morning News. No, that's two words. I have but one word. Shame. Shame Shame on you. You are disgracing the city of Dallas. And it is not fair to do that. I'll tell you where there should be plaques in this city. There were a number of brave, courageous residents of the city. People, longtime residents of Texas, who had the courage to speak truth to power in the face of threats and intimidation. Right over there was Jean Hill. And she's still there, 35 years later. One of the first to tell the truth, the threats came from behind that wooden fence, and they attacked her and ridiculed her. There should be a plaque over there commemorating Jean Hill, right on that spot where she's standing. Back up here, in the railroad tower, was Lee Bowers. Yes. He was brave, and he came forward, and he said, talked about license plates of cars, because he could see what was going on back there, in that parking lot area behind the wooden fence on this grassy knoll. He talked about what he saw, the bumper stickers, the license plates. When the shots were fired, he said, my attention was riveted to that wooden fence. Something caught it, a patch of light, patch of smoke. Something caught my attention. And we interviewed him. All of these people we interviewed on the scene were telling us what had taken place, and he wanted to tell it to the Warren Commission, as so many of the witnesses did. From the time we interviewed him until the time that film was released, he had been killed. Up on that railroad bridge, S.M. Holland, R.C. Dodd, James Simmons, and the others who heard the shot looked directly at the wooden fence, and everyone said the same thing. I saw puffs of smoke coming over the wooden fence. When the first one told that to the lawyer for the Warren Commission, and they acted as if he was crazy, he said, well, you don't have to just ask me. Many of us were up there. Ask the others. That's all the information they needed. They never called anybody else to testify. The key eyewitnesses up on that railroad bridge. That area here, the grassy knoll area, should be called the Lee Bowers Memorial Park.
Yes.
That railroad bridge should be the Holland, Dodd, Simmons Railroad Bridge. That's the kind of monument that should be erected to the people of this city and of this state who had the courage to come forward while the Dallas Morning News lied 35 years ago and continues to lie 35 years later. This is the place where our leader was murdered. This is hallowed ground, and the people of this country know it. This is supposed to be the largest tourist attraction in Dallas. I was here yesterday, I was here this morning. Of course, people are here now because of speaking, because of the program, but I was here yesterday and this morning, and people were all over the grassy knoll looking at the area. Nobody, I didn't see them all looking up the 6th floor of the book depository building, because the people of America know the truth, even though the government is unwilling to share the information with us. That day in Dallas, in this city, at this location, when the government of the United States executed its own president, when that happened, we as a nation lost our code of honor, lost our sense of honor. That can only be restored when the government of the United States, and it will not do it without us insisting and marching and fighting and voting and putting this matter on the agenda, but when the day comes that the government of the United States tells us the truth and all of the factual details about the assassination, including their role in the murder, when that day comes, for the first moment, honor will be restored to this nation. Thank you.
Our next speaker is a member of the board of directors of our organization. He's a medical doctor from San Francisco, and he has researched this issue And he has also written in the Journal of the American Medical Association and the Columbia Journalism Review. Dr. Gary Aquilar.
It's always very embarrassing for me to follow a powerful speaker as Mark Lane, and I certainly can't hope to match either his eloquence or his wit or his command of his case. But what I can share with you is one of the things which those of you who follow the case in the mass media won't know about, and that is evidence that was discussed in the October 12, 1998 issue of Newsweek magazine, wherein Gerald Posner had an article describing the new evidence that there are autopsy photographs missing, and he cites one woman, Sandra K. Spencer, saying the autopsy photographs are missing. He quickly dismisses it because he says it looks like the Kennedy family had these autopsy photographs taken with the body all cleaned up so they could save those for posterity and bury the real autopsy photographs. Well, Sandra K. Spencer is one person out of 7 credible witnesses, and perhaps the least credible of all, to declare that autopsy photographs are missing. This is something you will not read in the Dallas Morning News. This is something you will not read in Time or Newsweek, but it's very clearly established. The Assassination Records Review Board's releases are very clear on the point that all 3 of the autopsy pathologists have described autopsy photographs that are missing. One of them defiantly stood shoulder to shoulder against the House Select Committee on Assassinations, which is supposed to tell us the truth about the Warren Commission's failings in 1978, and he told them over and over again, I took those photographs of the skull wound, I took the internal aspects of the skull wound, external aspects of the skull wound. This is Dr. Fink, the only forensic pathologist who was there. Not only did the House Select Committee on Assassinations not report that, the House Select Committee on Assassinations suppressed that from its public releases, from its report. It was never out into the public until the Assassination Records Review Board came along. There is enormous evidence in the forensics area and the medical area alone that indicates there was more than one assassin. But what is most shameful of all is the government's willingness in even subsequent examinations to lie about that evidence. Thank God there was Assassination Records Review Board. Thank God that they did do the work that they have done, because now we no longer have to rely on government-appointed authorities who examine the government to decide to tell us that we can trust the government's original conclusions. We know that we can't. We know that they have destroyed evidence, not only in the medical autopsy area, not only among photographs. We know that witnesses have been intimidated, and it is a shame that you will not read about that. There were no credible journalists who have touched the story. It's a story not unlike stories about crack cocaine. Those stories led to the downfall of Gary Webb. Then 2 volumes of Inspector General, CIA Inspector General Hitt's report come out admitting far more than Gary Webb had even alleged about the CIA's complicity in cocaine importation. And yet you won't read about that in the Dallas Morning News. You barely get a small column about it in the New York Times after they have wasted many, many column inches in defaming journalists who talk about the subject. I think that it is important that those of you who are here today continue to insist that your government is accountable to you and that it not conduct its operations in secrecy, that it not deny you the evidence that it has collected in its investigations, and that it stand as accountable to them as it insists that we be accountable to it. And I'm thankful for all of you for being here today, and I hope that you will continue to work with us in every way that you can to help us force the government to be responsible to come out into the future and really admit to us what the full truth is about the Kennedy assassination. Thank you.
Our next speaker is another member of the board of our organization. He is a professor of political science at the University of Massachusetts at Dartmouth. He is the author of 9 books and dozens of articles on the assassination. Dr. Philip Melanson.
As we commemorate the 35th anniversary of this terrible political tragedy that so negatively affected our lives, our policies, our political system, and later our faith in our own government, we should remind ourselves that the tragedy of President Kennedy's assassination has been compounded by a separate but related tragedy. The failure of our law enforcement institutions, the failure of our political institutions, and the failure of the media to effectively pursue and discover the truth of who killed President Kennedy and why. And until that happens, and it's never too late to find the truth if citizens demand it, until that happens, the original tragedy will be compounded like a bad political debt into the next millennium, and our faith in our system will continue to erode. And I think also that the failure to come to grips with who killed President Kennedy and why has been related to the other assassinations in the 1960s. And that's why Martin Luther King's family is now begging the Justice Department to look for justice in that case. And you'll hear from Sirhan's lawyer in the Robert Kennedy case. Had we come to terms with what happened and admitted it and discovered it, our whole history of the 1960s must be different. And I refer to what the other speakers mentioned, that if the vast majority of us in the public believe that this case is an unsolved conspiracy, who are the minority in officialdom to deny us the truth and to cling to the lone assassin theory like it was an absolute religion in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary? Thank you.
Our next speaker is an acclaimed author and professor of history at the University of Maryland. His books include JFK in Vietnam and Oswald and the CIA, Dr. John Newman. I would like to say a few words about the media and a couple of the new developments for all of you gathered. You probably all know it anyway, but it's a good moment to remember a couple of these developments and what's been going on. But I want to start by saying when I come here at this time of the year, I remember another place, a place connected to this place. And without the events that had happened here, this other place wouldn't exist, and that's the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C. And it's a memorial unlike any war memorial in the world. I mean, I've been to Russia and China and Germany. People often frequent those war memorials. They have names on them like ours do, but they eat lunch there and they talk, and it's a nice place to be. I don't know how many of you have been to the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C., but nobody hangs out there for fun. It's a very, very somber place because there's still something going on there, something very deep that took place in our country. It's still in our psyche and our culture, and it connects directly to Dealey Plaza, and I think most people know that. I'm not going to give a speech on the Vietnam War. I just want to say that I think it's clear now that John Kennedy was on his way pulling us out of Vietnam when he died. And the events here in Dealey Plaza catapulted this country into that devastating debacle called the Vietnam War. I only want to take a couple of minutes. There are other speakers. I'd like to just echo something Mark Lane was talking about earlier in the media, but I'd like to talk about the mainstream media just for a second. I just heard that CNN this morning said that for the first time in all these years that there were no events planned for Dealey Plaza on this day. So you are not here. This gathering does not exist.
We just existed.
Furthermore, the evening before last, none other than Dan Rather made an announcement, that major icon of network television, that the Review Board, you've been hearing about them today, had conducted this very large investigation. They looked at all these millions of pages of documents and had discovered that the lone nut hypothesis was true. And this they attributed to the Review Board himself, Judge Thunheim. Judge Thunheim was here in Dallas and refutes this story. And of course, all of you who follow the story know that the Review Board has taken no such position. But it never ceases to amaze me how the media can twist and turn and obfuscate and block this movement. This is a mass movement to find the truth. Let me just close by a couple of examples that are rolling out of these new files. And these are, I think, appropriate to remember because of what happened here in Dealey Plaza. I'm thinking in particular of a tape-recorded conversation between President Johnson and Senator Russell, one of the commissioners, where at great length, of course, they were able to save the situation and preserve the lone nut hypothesis with that wonderful, wonderful sine qua non of the lone nut hypothesis, CE 399, the super bullet. Magic bullet, as you know, that crashed through broke 3 bones, made 7 holes, and did all that damage, and then came out pristine on a stretcher.
But this newly released tape is very interesting because Senator Russell calls the president to explain to him what this theory is. The bullet did all these things. And at the end of it, you can hear him say distinctly, and I don't believe a word of it. And then President Johnson says, and I don't either. And I thought that was an appropriate thing to share with you just as an example of the types of things that are coming out of the files. Of course, there's the marginalia and the Warren report and the galley proofs of our esteemed President Ford, who moved the bullet hole up. And these are the types of things that are rolling forward in the documents. And of course, the mainstream media is not there to put them on page 1. Occasionally, we are given note of these types of things, but they're passing in the night. But I'm heartened to see that by the turnout here today, that with respect to the American people, this is not passing in the night. And I hope as we stand here today and think about these events and pass the torch to a younger generation, which we are doing, that our movement and our desire for the truth of this case continues on. Thank you very much.
We're now getting close to the hour of 12:30, and so we want to move into the part of our program which is the memorial for the events that occurred here 35 years ago. And for the purpose of that part of the program, I'd like to introduce to you the executive secretary of our organization, COPA, and a man who's devoted himself for a number of years to working on the project that we have with our organization, but also to doing his own independent research on the issue of the assassination. I think those of you who have had experience to work with John Judge know of his serious and sincere commitment to investigating the issues that are at stake here, and to his contribution that he has made to the history of investigation of the assassination. He has really been the heart and soul of the work that we have done through COPA. He's put tremendous volunteer effort. He's sacrificed and suffered a great deal from the efforts that he has made that have gone largely uncompensated. And so let me introduce to you the Executive Secretary of COPA, John Judd.
It's interesting to see such a crowd. I, for the better part of the last 25 years, came out here every year, usually with maybe 5 or 6 people, often in much worse weather than this, on November 22nd each year with the researcher Penn Jones, who some of you know, who passed on this year, and this is the first year that we've been here without him in our, at least alive. He hadn't been in our presence for several years because of deteriorating Alzheimer's disease. But Penn has passed on, and Penn did early work on the deaths of the witnesses. From the inception of the national security and military intelligence state in the late 1940s, the history of this country has been a commodity that's owned by that national security state. And the people that don't own their own history are a conquered people. And much of the effort that I put in relation to the coalition, separate from my interest in the particular assassination, has to do with that idea of taking our own history back, of owning it ourselves. And much of it is still locked up in government vaults and hidden from us. And we're really the only ones that can restore it. 35 years ago, in my view, there was a coup d'etat here in Dealey Plaza. And the government has really not recovered in any significant way toward democracy since that day. Not that it had pure democracy up until then. It was compromised in many ways already. But Kennedy began to represent for people hope and change and a response from the top levels of government to the popular movements of the time for civil rights, for arms limitations, for an end to the Cold War, for decency from the corporations in this country. And Kennedy was responding to popular movements in a way that presidents after Kennedy rarely have. And so what was assassinated here that day was not just a particular man or a particular president, but a sense of hope by the American people. And I think that the government has let us know over the last 35 years fairly consistently that they did kill the president. And they killed him from a very high level. and that if they can kill the president, they can kill any of us they'd like to, and that we should sit down and shut up and get out of the way. But I'm hoping that there's enough of America and decency left in people in this country, and I get evidence of that all the time, that we can understand that there are more of us, and we can think, and we can own our own lives, and we can take back our own democracy if we want it. We'll do a moment of silence now. It's 12:30. 35 years ago, President Kennedy was assassinated here. Thank you. Peter Dale Scott, one of the leading researchers in this case, couldn't be here with us this year. He sent an email last night and he said two interesting things. He said that we've come into a new era and one of the major tasks ahead of us right now is to focus on getting the 600 to 750,000 pages of government documents that are still locked up on the Martin Luther King assassination. The other thing he said that was interesting is he cited a federal statute that makes it illegal for a citizen in this country to lie to the government. And he suggested a similar statute be passed that would make it illegal for the government to lie to its people. I hope that you will take this topic seriously and continue to act for full release of the files and to get at the truth. And you're welcome to join us starting again at 1:30 for the remainder of the agenda at our national meeting just down Houston Street here at the Amtrak station. At the south end of the station, upstairs on the second floor, we have additional people speaking about the assassination, and we have a panel about what's to be done in the future. So you're welcome to join us and take your democracy back.
Thank you, John. We have a series of other speakers until 1 p.m. of people who have been involved in the investigation over the past 35 years. The next is William Turner, who has been the author of numerous books on the JFK assassination and the Cuban and Mafia connections. His books have addressed Robert Kennedy's assassination as well. His books have been translated into Russian, Japanese, French, and Spanish. He is currently working on a new book entitled Rearview Mirror, Looking Back.
Thank you, Dan. Exactly 35 years ago, plus 2 days, I came down here on assignment from San Francisco for a national magazine to do an article on the breakdown in security that resulted in the assassination being successful. And I was assigned to it because of my background as an FBI agent. I can tell you that when I arrived, the mood was extremely somber here in Dealey Plaza. The floodlights were on. Reporters from all over the world were converging. People had laid floral wreaths and flowers along the curbstone where the shooting took place. It was very eerie, and the headquarters of the Dallas Police Department was a feeding frenzy of reporters trying to find out exactly what happened. I had a very tight deadline. I could only contend with the security breakdown issue at that time, which was that Oswald had been an informant for the FBI, and this was the reason that they had not furnished his name to the Secret Service prior to the presidential visit. There was one other thing that I remembered, is I talked to a patrolman named Welcome Eugene Barnett, who had been posted in front of the school book building in crowd control at the time of the assassination. And he told me that a woman had come running from the grassy knoll, it wasn't known as that early, and told him that shots had been fired from here. That being the case, I became very critical of the Warren Commission, and when its report came out, I vetted it closely and found out it was pretty much a fairy tale. I'm proud to say that I was associated with District Attorney Jim Garrison in New Orleans, who tried to reopen this assassination. Jim was a great American, and he was on the trail, as his book said, of the assassins when he was destroyed by the media after the Clay Shaw trial. In any event, the Garrison investigation paved the way for what we know today, and I believe that we really know to a fair degree or a good degree of journalistic certitude what happened. First of all, the motives were piling up. John Kennedy had supposedly withheld air cover at the Bay of Pigs, motive number one. John Kennedy had failed to invade Cuba during the missile crisis in October of 1962, motive number two. John Kennedy had promised to withdraw from Vietnam, motive number four. And John Kennedy, at the time that he was assassinated, was on a second track, which was to secretly carry on negotiations with Cuba to bring about a detente. These motives piled up to the point where it was necessary to assassinate him. And I think it's very obvious with the compilation of the information that we have today that the whole thing, the mechanism of it, came out of the allegiance between the CIA and the rabid Cuban exiles and the mafia. They already had an assassination apparatus set up for Castro. They switched targets and they hit Kennedy. And I hope that you will join us in perpetuating this investigation, because I think we're getting very close. And believe me, most of the American people feel the same way you do. After the JFK movie by Oliver Stone came out, a CBS poll showed that something like 80% of American people believed it was a conspiracy. 49% believed the CIA was involved. They didn't believe Oswald acted alone. So there's a great feeling in this country that we have been denied the truth, and I hope you will support us in continuing the investigation. Thanks very much.
Our next speaker is Hal Verb, who has been a longtime researcher of the assassination of JFK. He has produced television programs, articles, and books on the subject. He is considered part of the first generation of assassination critics, and he comes to us from California. Hal Verb, Hal.
Thank you. I want to tell Copeland I appreciate the fact that you're letting me speak. I hold no special credentials of any sort. I'm just a private citizen who followed this case actually from day one. I have my own personal reasons for why I followed this case. But I want to make a point here. Each and every person was affected by that day. There are witnesses here who I become friends with. There are writers and researchers who I become friends with also. There's a community of interest. These are the Americans. These are the combat veterans in the fight for truth. You want medals to be awarded? Award them to the people who are here. Let me tell you something about a comment that one of the speakers had said. He said, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." I would put it more appropriately, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you mad." What was thing about it is that I never believed from early on that the truth was being told. Never. That's why I continue to participate. As many of my friends know, I'm a collector of quotations. I want to quote you two important quotations which I've gathered through the years. One is by a fighter in the war against slavery, Wendell Phillips, who said, "Anything that cannot stand the test of truth, let it crack." As a matter of fact, the Warren Commission, the House Select Committee, those efforts, they cracked. This case has cracked, is continuing to crack, and will continue to be cracked as long as people like yourself are here. Now, I just want to make a further comment about my friends who I have known here through the years. Mark Lane, who I worked with early, a courageous man. He wrote the original J'accuse email Zola equivalent for the National Guardian. More honor should be due Mark Lane because of that initial courageous attempt. Where were the lawyers? Where were the lawyers who stood out in defense? Only Mark Lane stood up. What was the American Bar Association doing representing Oswald? There, his mouth was quiet. That tells you a lot about the legal situation early in those days. But what about the educators? What about the writers? What about the teachers? Some of you are here. Another thing I'd like to quote is from an author. He was a great author in the 20s and 30s. He was in the Black Renaissance movement. We don't need more cowards. We don't need a cowardly government. We need some more brave soldiers in the fight. I'm calling upon you to ask yourself, ask what you can do for people like us. I know what they can do for you. Thank you.
Our next speaker is a local Dallas area researcher, and his name is Russ McLean. I introduce him to you now.
Thank you. November 22nd, 1963. We were young that day, and we still believed in fairy tales, at least until 12:30. We gather here today to remember a time that was, to recall the memory of a man we chose to follow his manship. I'm 37 years old now. For me, November 22nd, 1963 reminds me of the Don Henley hit, The End of the Innocents. For it was oh so much more than a man that died that day in the streets of Dallas. For a lot of us, it was the death of our hopes and of our ideas. Being a husband and father, I am reminded every day of the miracle and the fragility of life. The need to make each moment count, for we might not get another. From this moment forward, let us strive to, as Robert Kennedy once said, make gentle the light of this world in whatever endeavors we may pursue. We don't have to agree on everything. What we have to do is realize the greater good of functioning by one simple principle, the truth, such as exposing the complete and unvarnished truth in the death of John Fitzgerald Kennedy. This is a debt owed to 3 people more than anyone else I know. 2 are famous, 1 is not. 2 stood on a cold Washington street one day, the young daughter clutching her mother's hand, the young son celebrating his 3rd birthday, saluting his fallen father's casket as it passed. The other is my son, Andrew John. Why do I mention my son? He is but a small part of the literally millions and millions of children who will one day inherit the country you and I have created for them. What do we tell them? Do we look them in the eye and say we did our best? Words like truth, honor, and justice still mean what they should? Or do we look past them into the distance and say we didn't try hard enough? You have to look out for yourself. You're on your own. No one else matters.
Would like to speak with us today on the issue of the assassination of Robert Kennedy Lawrence Teeter.
It's an honor to be here with you. We stand today on sacred ground at the site on which the President of the United States was murdered by the security services of the United States government to perpetuate the war in Vietnam and keep the war in Vietnam going and perpetuate the Cold War. In 1968, Senator Robert Kennedy announced his candidacy for the presidency. His specific central campaign promise was that if elected President of the United States, he would pull U.S. forces out of Vietnam. When he won the California primary on June 4th, 1968, his nomination to the presidential candidacy of the Democratic Party was virtually assured. So was his election to the presidency. That night, June 5th, 1968, Robert Kennedy was killed. That put a stop to the capacity of the anti-war and civil rights forces of the United States to install or elect as president someone who would stop that war. That assassination guaranteed the continuation of the war. It guaranteed the election of Richard Nixon. It gave us everything that followed. I represent Sirhan Sirhan, the seventh victim of the conspiracy to murder Senator Robert Kennedy. In the case of John Kennedy, there continues to be controversy about the autopsy. Was the autopsy faked, or was it real, and was the body tampered with? Let me tell you why Congress was never willing to look at the Robert Kennedy case, unlike the other two. In the Robert Kennedy case, for one thing, there's an autopsy report which exonerates Sirhan, implicates someone else, and establishes conclusively a conspiracy, which means it blows away the official explanation. That autopsy report establishes that Sirhan was out of position and out of range and could not possibly have shot Robert Kennedy. That autopsy report was withheld from the defense for months until it was too late for the defense to use it in Sirhan's defense at the time of his trial. There was massive obstruction of justice by the police. The police learned early on that more bullets were fired in the pantry that could have come from Sirhan's gun. They learned this within 24 hours of the assassination, no later. Yet they continued to maintain, as they continue to maintain to this day, that only one person committed this crime, that only one gun was involved. We were able to establish that 4 guns were used, at least 4 guns were involved in this case. 3 of them have been destroyed. The 4th gun at the archives, we don't think is Sirhan's gun. We were able to establish that every single bullet introduced into evidence in Sirhan's trial was a faked, fabricated, forged bullet. We were able to establish that the police put together a comparison photomicrograph purporting to show a match between the Sirhan test bullet and the bullet removed from Senator Kennedy's neck, and that those bullets actually used in that photograph were faked victim bullets. They matched 2 faked victim bullets to fabricate against the case against Sirhan. We're able to establish that the Los Angeles Police Department seized the only photographs taken of the assassination, and that 2,410 photographs were incinerated in a hospital incinerator by the LAPD in August of '68, within less than 3 months of the assassination. We're able to establish that the police test-fired multiple guns in the case and extracted bullets from multiple guns, test bullets, as though they recovered multiple guns in the case. They never, at the crime scene, they never acknowledged this. The second gun that they test-fired was, in fact, a gun that was in police custody before the assassination, which circumstantially implicates the LAPD not only in obstruction of justice, not only in a cover-up, but in the assassination of Senator Kennedy himself. What happened to that gun? It was destroyed in July, next month after the assassination. We were able to establish that in all probability, Sirhan wasn't even conscious of what was happening at the time that this crime was committed. The top expert in hypnosis in the United States, Dr. Herbert Spiegel, who teaches at Columbia University, has given us a declaration, which is now on file with the Supreme Court of the state of California, establishing that in all probability, Sirhan was unconscious at the time of the assassination, and was acting in accordance with hypnotic programming administered before the assassination. We have massive evidence to prove all of this. I would say that there are disturbing similarities between all of these crimes, all of the 3 major assassinations of the 60s. In each case, the victim opposed the war in Vietnam and stood as an opponent who could create real problems for the military's desire to continue the war in Vietnam. In each case, the government has covered up a massive conspiracy. In each case, they clung stubbornly to an official explanation of a lone assassin. In each case, the officially designated perpetrator is somebody who is portrayed as having atrocious views. In each case, in all probability, the fall guy, and there was a fall guy in each case, was led around by the nose, was not culpable, was not knowledgeable of any conspiracy, and was maneuvered into positions without his having any advanced knowledge of what was happening. These cases are all similar. You know about vandalization of the crime scene here in Dallas because you know about the destruction of the freeway sign, the windshield, and the alteration of pavement. But do you know that the LAPD vandalized the crime scene in the Robert Kennedy case, removed the door frame containing extra bullets, and then secretly destroyed this door frame and ceiling panels after the trial, right after the trial, pursuant to an illegally issued, secretly administered court order that was handed out without the knowledge of defense counsel. The similarities between these crimes are amazing. We have currently pending before the Supreme Court of the State of California a petition for writ of habeas corpus designed to obtain an evidentiary hearing at a new trial. Our work is heavily dependent upon the brilliant, pioneering research of Rosalind Mangan, the researcher, and the support of the Sirhan family, especially Adele Sirhan. We hope to get some justice in this case. Ours is the only surviving assassinations case to date. Lee Harvey Oswald was killed with the connivance of the Dallas Police Department. James Earl Ray was denied medical attention and died. The only living so-called assassin of the three major assassinations, therefore the only currently open case in a legal sense, is this case, the Robert Kennedy assassination case. There are definite relations between all these cases. We commend all of you for your research, for your support, for your interest in these cases, and applaud you for your efforts. Thank you for coming.
We began with saying from the Bible, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." We challenge all of you to join us as active citizens of our country to make certain that the truth is known about what happened here 35 years ago, to make sure that public officials, the people who seek to be public officials, are put to the test of how they feel about what happened here and the aftermath and the cover-up of what happened here. Because truly we will not be free unless we know the truth of the events that happened here. At this point, I'm going to recognize Beverly Oliver. She was here on a similar day 35 years ago. She was standing right across over there on the other side at that time. And I'm going to recognize her, and she is going to sing for us Amazing Grace. Beverly?
And it is always a privilege mixed with a lot of sorrow to be able to come down here on the 22nd of November. But while I sing Amazing Grace, I just want to say one brief word, and that is to thank all the researchers, all the people whose lives have actually been endangered because of the research that they're doing, and just thank them all for the grace that they have in their lives that keeps them going. Amazing Grace.
It's amazing, so amazing, it's amazing, so
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. Sing God's praise, that when we first begun,
COPA conference. We are going to resume at 1:30 p.m. in the Union Station. Anyone who'd like to join us and plan for future events and future activities, please join us over at the Union Station at 1:30 p.m. Thank you very much for being here this afternoon. Let me recognize John Judge for a few announcements.
There's some speakers here from another conference that's going on concerning Kennedy assassination held by JFK Lancer. Roger Peterson is here. He was going to make some comments, and also Russ Van de Veerdonk, who was one of the stand-ins for JFK in Oliver Stone's movie. So this is Roger Peterson. He does public relations work in California. He had a very good article about the current research on the assassination in American History magazine.
Good afternoon. We're all still here. And it's been an hour. Why is it that we're all still here? Given that something happened here as long as 35 years ago. The reason is because every poll taken of the American people since 1964, a vast majority of Americans believe that the silliest conspiracy theory of all time is called the Warren Report. Just this week, a poll indicates that fully 73% of all Americans believe that President Kennedy died as a result of a conspiracy. Only 18% believe that Oswald did it alone. And when you reduce the Warren Report down to a conversation,
say hello to you, wish you were here.
This is Mr. Summers, who's here. And
Smith, wish you were here, wish you a lot of health.
Thank you.
Robert?
Oh yeah, well heck.
Yeah, get on there. Robert Johnson, long-time researcher. Wish you were here, sir.
Thank you.
You hadn't missed a year yet, have you? Not yet. I don't think so. I ain't one I've been down to. I'm glad to hear you. Glad you have. Oh, yeah. Glad to see you also. I thank everybody for being here. Yeah. We long gone. A lot of the witnesses know you may have come down, so I'm glad you took them to come down. Well, I am too. I wouldn't. Oh, yeah. I certainly did.
You don't want to make any comments on the 35th?
No, because I appreciate the fact that they still honor. And I think the world that Kennedy and did. And I want to just thank everyone that was here for being here today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Summers.
Member of the association here? No.
Dow, Texas County. I think it's Dow, Texas. Is that the Dow, Texas?
Isn't that ironic?
I don't know.
Are you getting your Oh, did you write down with us? Well, thanks for calling Jason got a new bike, and then I started, which was a road bike, I started riding his bike, which I could go much farther.
Jack Ruby Star Dancer. And I'm Madeline Duncan Brown. I had a relationship with the great Lyndon Baines Johnson for 21 years. I had a son by Stephen Mark Brown, who passed away September the 28th, 1990. This is really a sad day here in Dealey Plaza because it brings back some terrible, terrible memories.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Now we can go.
Okay, I'm Shari Angel. Oswald, Lee Harvey Oswald was in the carousel. My husband, the comedian Wally Weston, knocked him out for calling him a communist. And he definitely, you can ask Beverly Oliver, she'll tell you the same thing.
So Lee Harvey Oswald was definitely in the carousel
yes,
club
he was.
Prior to the assassination of John Kennedy.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you very much.
On camera.
No, I don't think Lee Harvey Oswald fired a shot.
That was just the oil barons did it.
Well, it was the oil and intelligence.
Talking to Jean too, she says, Blanche, she's talking.
Well, there is a photograph that they refuse to accept that plainly shows a shooter right over here. Plainly. I saw it again. Ed Tatro from Massachusetts had it. We were looking at it and through, you know, some real high-powered tech.
That's no book, is it? Any book or anything?
No.
Yeah, well, no, it's not. It's the Mormon photograph.
No, it's not the
You're not talking?
No, it's not Mormon. I don't know who made the shot. Very, very right over there.
Well, you're talking about Badge Man.
Well, I don't know if they called him
The
Badge
Badge Man, yeah, because that was in the corner of the Mormon photograph by MIT. Gary Mack went ahead with Jack and had that taken to MIT. And they were it was a firm conclusion that was in fact a man, that the muzzle blast was in fact given depth and breadth. However, National Enquirer magazine got in on this and totally discredited the credibility of the researchers. So Gary still has a photograph, but that's what's
Well,
shown.
Ed Tatro from Quincy, Massachusetts has one, and I looked at it. There is no mistake. Who was it? Mark Lane? They were talking about Posner, and Posner said, case closed.
Right.
All right. And Mark says, we don't care how many things you have, computers, we have eyewitnesses that saw it. So, you know.
Exactly.
Where were you at the time the day it was going to happen?
Where I was, right over here in the Great Courthouse. We were finalizing plans to go to Austin. I was with the Democrats, and it may have already happened. Dallas is small, and I was parked over on Market Street, and here these guys were fussing and cussing. I'm lighthearted, and I said, "Hey guys, I'll see y'all in Austin," you know, and I blew them a kiss. Time I walked a block over, get in my car, and I went Houston Street. It takes about 7 minutes to get across. When I walked in to have my hair fixed at Tyches, it was already on the air that he had been shot. So I called Lou Sterrett. And you know, here not long ago I was sitting and thinking, I think a lot about this. And I said, those people that I saw and left should have been at the trademark. They were the head table people. And they were still over there in the courthouse. After it happened, they all went home.
No kidding.
What time did Lyndon go to the Murchison party?
Someone has asked me, and it seemed like it's about 10:30 or 11 when he came in.
Because he was in Houston.
He was in Houston, but keep in mind.
He's always ahead, wasn't he, of the presidential party?
Yeah.
He didn't fly in Air Force One to Carswell Air Force Base.
No. And of course, we have Loveville. We didn't have DFW.
No.
Yes, I know. Yes.
Murchison lives in the Park Cities, doesn't he?
Huh?
He did live over there near White Rock Lake.
Who?
Clint Murchison.
He lived over here on Forest Lane.
Oh, okay.
I tell you, it's sad. What people do not realize, it was a turnover in our government. It was the mafia, the oil people, back to the oil people, and the mafia was out. Today, we're experiencing the same thing in Washington. It's the elite trying to control the world. Lay people don't understand this. I'll tell you something else I found out. I had known Bill Moyers since early 50. He was going to, what kind of school to make a minister? I don't know what you call it.
Theology or?
Yeah. And Lyndon held Air Force One out here until Bill came from Austin to go with him to Washington that day. I was going through the book Elite. Are you familiar with the book on the elite? Well, you need to get it. It's from Galen Ross, I think in San Marcos. Anyway, Bill Moyers' family lived in CIA, all through the years. He is now.
Oh, yeah?
Interesting.
Yeah.
You need to get that book. Everyone needs to get the book.
What's the name of it?
Elite.
Where do you get it? And where is it?
They have some over at the Conspiracy Museum.
Okay.
I don't know if Andy has any of them or not, but
That's the Raw Bookshop?
yeah, but the Conspiracy Museum. Anyway, if you read the news, watch the names. It's frightening.
Madeline, did you ask Mr. Hunt at the time about what happened?
Which time are you talking
About
about?
the assassination?
Well, I didn't, let me tell you, in 1960, he came back from the Democrat convention in LA, they were all upset because Lyndon had not gone on the first ticket. And you'd had to know the old man. I liked him very much. And he said, well, we have lost a battle. We're going to win this war. So after the assassination, we were all frightened, the ones, the inner circle. So we were told Hunt went on a sabbatical out in Mexico. He and John Carrington went to Washington, and they stayed about 3 weeks working on the oil depletion. Hunt came back to Dallas. He was the happiest man you ever saw in your life. He said, well, we won the war. So, you just have to put the two and two together.
Did President Johnson more or less confirm that story?
Well, see, when I met him on New Year's Eve, people in Dallas were talking that Lyndon was cause of it. So when I said, I've got to...
I'm glad you made it to the 35th.
Well, I'm happy I made it through the 35th also, not because of his death, but because I'm still alive myself.
Well, good. All right, now where were you standing when...
I was right across the street over there on the Gracie Knoll.
You were... Oh. Oh.
Yeah.
No, you come down here.
I've been down here a lot.
Well, I don't come from there. I'm in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I come
and
down.
And this is Doug Horn, who's on the review board.
How are you? Doug, I'm happy to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I've seen you interviewed on the Nova show, I think.
Yeah, and Jack Anderson.
Can you tell us that story?
Well, yeah.
About who you ran into over here?
Well, I can't tell you who, but I can tell you the person that stopped me, and then when I did tell them about it later on, they said we didn't have no FBI man or local police, I thought detective because he was dressed, and like a detective would dress, hat, coat, tie. And they said, we didn't have one in that vicinity. I said, well, okay, you didn't have one. That's what I saw, and I don't care. And
the man had a gun with him. You said,
yeah. And they said they didn't have one, like I was going to argue about it,
Tell us your whole thing. When you were standing over there, right?
I was right over there, and then after the motorcade got by and everything, and when it all happened, after the second shot was when I hit the ground there, and I'm sitting there on that Zapruder film looking.
You are in the Zapruder film?
Yes, he is.
Yeah, right.
You're the
there.
guy that hits the ground?
Yeah,
he is.
Yeah, and I'm trying to, what I'm trying to do.
With your arms?
Yeah, I'm trying to still stay over in that car because I know I saw him, his head get hit, And I'm still trying to see what happens over in the car itself. And, but the reason I hit the ground also is because a motorbike cop come off his bike there and looking in my direction. I thought he was going to start shooting at someone in that direction. And then after the motorcade went and everything, I come running over here, and that's when I encountered this guy.
Right about where?
This guy?
Up here, or up here.
And what did he do?
Yeah.
This area right here?
Yeah.
And what did he do? And he had what?
Well, he had a gun under his coat. And they later on asked me what kind of gun it was. It's covered up, and I had even described the barrel. It was like a automatic would look. We've got a bottom part to it. I don't know much about guns. And they said, well, can you tell him was it a machine gun? Well, I said, all I saw was that barrel.
But what did he want? He wanted to tell you something?
No, he told me not to go up, not to come up here any further. We could get shot or killed.
Oh, I see. In other words, he said you could get shot or killed.
Stopped us, and then I...
From coming up here?
Yeah. And then I went on back over there to the post office where I come from to start with. So I wasn't going to argue with him, didn't need to anyhow. Wasn't no point in it.
So he had a gun under a coat?
Yeah.
That he showed it to you deliberately?
He didn't show it to me. I just saw it there because when he stopped me...
He had it all drawn already?
You just knew he had some kind of authority. That's all you accept it when someone tells you that.
You saw the end of his authority, the tip of it.
You run over and they say, I'll tell you not to come up here any further. You can get shot.
So when you hit the dirt, at that moment, where did you think it came from? At the moment you hit the dirt?
When I hit the dirt, I really didn't think where it come from. I just believed it was more than one shooter because I heard Conley say they're going to kill us all. That was a power suggestion. Then I heard Jackie Kennedy say, oh God, no, And you just, again, there, you thought it was. A lot of people were shooting. When you hear
How fast was the car going?
It come to a momentary stop there.
Right there?
Oh, yeah.
It came to a momentary stop?
Yeah, not long.
That's what the Newmans told us again last night.
Just instant. Yeah.
Really?
Oh, it was the truth.
You remember seeing them with their little boys over here?
Well, later I saw the pictures. You know, I didn't. You didn't see anybody then.
You were focused on what you were doing.
Yeah. You didn't see anybody then. You just heard.
Came to a momentary stop.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I know the new ones, and what they said is true at any story I've heard any of.
You recall seeing any debris come from the head in any direction?
Well, I saw kind of like the explosion. Yeah, it was bad side. Yeah, I did. And that's when I heard Jack Kennedy, I guess, say, "Oh my God, no."
Toward the front or the rear, or do you remember?
Well, I can't.
mean, the explosion, the direction.
Did you see the guys on the radio in the front, or see anything in the front of the car?
No, I don't know that I thought anything about where it come from. I don't think you've got time to think that. Personally, I didn't. And it just sounded like it seemed like it was a horrible event there. I saw his head just like explode, that's all. And, hell, I guess you just got fearful then about that.
Did you see the guy climb on the back of the car?
I saw the guy, the Secret Service man. I thought that he would come and running, jumping on that car to cover him up, you know. But I understand from reading later on, he slipped on the pedal on the back of that car. So yeah, I was at.
Okay, so then you got up and walked over here.
Yeah, after all the cars.
And that's when you encountered a man with the coat and said, "You better not come up here."
Yeah, you can get shot or get killed. Well, no, that's what yeah, he said shot or kill. One of them words. I don't remember which. Well, it meant the same to me.
In a suit, like a man in a suit, or just a guy in a sport jacket, or was?
No, he was in a regular suit, just like this guy, with a tie and everything.
What did he have over the gun? A towel?
Just a raincoat.
A raincoat. A raincoat. Okay. I see.
Hell, he wouldn't have.
Okay, no worries. Piece of clothing.
Pictures of him if he'd had I would really been.
How come you could see the gun if he has a raincoat over it?
Because I was direct at him. It was just in a barrel. It was just exposed. That's all. I mean, this barrel you could see in that thing.
I got you.
It wasn't visible to anybody.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. When did you tell the story for the first time?
Well, I told that part after I went to the sheriff's department the next day and told him about 3 Mexicans I'd seen over there. And then later on someone theorized it might be Cubans, you know, stuff like that. And then when the Secret Service came out, and they said, well, we'll investigate that story. And then about, several weeks later, they come and said, we didn't have a FBI man there, and the police didn't have a detective there. And I said, okay. Isn't that one? All right.
Okay, you did it, but somebody did.
Do you have a business card today?
No, I did have some. I gave them all away.
Could you
I'm sorry.
Would you write down your thing for me so I put you in my database?
Yeah.
I'm the guy that wrote Best Evidence, but I'll send you a little letter and
Okay. You want my phone number? Or you want
Dad, wherever he is.
There he is. Not a Unitarian, but let's give him some credit. Some of my best friends are Unitarians. Hi, Art. Is this live? Is the sound on too?
It's live.
Doggone, it's live. My name's John Molanphy, and we're all out here trying to educate the public and give them some information on a ongoing problem we have, and that's the place called School of the Americas. And that's in Fort Benning, Georgia. And today, as we're marching around here in Dallas, there's a large national group of people who are going to cross the line, some of them for the second and third time, which puts them in jeopardy of federal arrest, to protest there being a School of the Americas. And what it's been doing over the past decades is to train the military dictators and the armed forces of Central American countries. And it's brought us such wonderful folks like Manuel Noriega and the men who murdered the Archbishop Romero, people who murdered the 6 Jesuits, their housekeeper and her daughter at the University of Central America in El Salvador, the men who murdered Gene Donovan and Ida Ford. And
you're trying to close this down, or?
Yeah, there've been a lot of votes on it in Congress, and it looks like with the latest change, the latest election, that it should get even more votes.
To kill it.
Yeah, it was only 7 votes shy last time, and with enough demonstration and education of the public and people calling their Congress people and senators and all to ask for this, it should pass the next time, and we should finally shut her down.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Sorry to cry, but I'm just so upset. And that's 200.
There, will you? And you've been talking about it for years.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
What was it about their behavior that seemed to be opposite of everyone else?
Oh,
or why
well,
were they suspicious?
Yes.
Oh, here they are there.
Here he is. This is Bond 8, Bond 9.
Bond 9.
What is Bond 9?
Oh, is that just a placeholder's name?
That's the photographer. Whatever her name was. This shows him looking this way. But I think, God, there's one of them that shows him looking the other way. In other words, I think what happened here is that he's beginning to turn and he walks up away. He doesn't go this way. He walks that way, goes away from it. And of course, the accomplice, where the hell is he? There's him. There's the accomplice. He goes down, he goes under the underpass, gets picked up by somebody in a car. And the guy had parked in the railroad yards. Drive right down with everybody else, pick him up, and take him off to the hospital. By John Perkins. That's what I think happened.
But the man who appeared as the umbrella man before the House Select Committee on Assassination, that was not
Louis Witt.
That was not Louis Witt.
Louis Witt was the guy that appeared before the House Select Committee. Louis Witt is
See, there's Umbrella Man.
Louis Witt's an unfortunate human being, but I'm sure he's being paid well.
Oh, you don't believe he was the umbrella man?
He had to say that he was. He had to say that. He said, "Well, I guess that's me."
Yeah.
He didn't ever really say he was the umbrella man.
Yeah.
But if you read his testimony, it is absolutely. It doesn't make any bit of sense. It doesn't fit any of the facts. And he was not there. Louis Witt was in.
Where was Louis Witt?
Louis Witt was in New York. He was under the alias of Gordon Novell.
Oh.
He was playing Gordon Novell in New York. He was at a meeting in New York, and it was the alias. No, it was the position in 20. God damn it! I think it was in 21, Club 21. But that's what Gordon told me he was.
Oh.
So that all fits very nicely.
But Louis Witt was no more in Dallas on the assassination day than you or I.
He was in New York.
Oh.
Y'all want to see the film?
This is Gordon.
Huh?
Novell's Novell is an umbrella man, and he gave me an alibi saying he was in New York. And it took me a hell of a long time to figure out that, okay, it was Louis Witt that was in New York using the name Gordon Novell. But Louis Witt never let anybody talk to him.
Oh.
Someday we'd have to talk to Louis Witt. That would be something we could, God damn it.
Where does he live?
Right in Dallas, for crying out loud. It's disgusting. Having him so close and having it. No, it's very, very frustrating. You can't get to him and you can't reach him and he won't come down here. And I should think, give him immunity, that's what we'd have to do. Who the hell's going to bother to give Louis Witt immunity? He isn't worth the pound of blowing to hell.
Sorry.
Bloody CIA.
I'll start it now.
Ah, it's disgusting. Disgusting. That whole story is just a very neat story. And the CIA must laugh over it every once in a while. How they fooled everybody. And they're so smart. That'd be a good thing to do. Try to get
Louis Witt.
Try to get Louis Witt to say something. Of course, as soon as you say that, then the whole damn thing falls apart. That's the trouble. That's why they won't dare do it, because then Gordon's on, and that's it.
And what are your feelings, this being the 35th anniversary of the assassination of President Kennedy? What are your thoughts or feelings, this being the 35th?
I'm too old. I have no real thoughts about it. I'll tell you one thing.
Tell us one thing.
When you listen to those people talking at Dealey Plaza, you'll find that every other word is the word conspiracy. That's why we called this the Conspiracy Museum in 1993. Because, damn it, the word conspiracy is a good word, and it expresses exactly what has happened. But in 1993, hardly anybody dared say the word conspiracy about the Kennedy assassination. There were a few people that mentioned it, but they never... Every single one of those speakers down there were talking conspiracy, conspiracy, conspiracy. Every other word was conspiracy. They don't even realize what they're talking about. They use the word because it sounds well and people listen to it. That's why we called it the Conspiracy Museum, because it's a very good word.
Yes.
It won't go away. That's my feeling about the 35th anniversary.
Do you think we'll ever find out the truth? Or?
It's right here behind me.
When will the government admit?
Never.
They'll never admit to a cover-up of...
I don't think they'll ever admit. They'll have to let the people who are associated with it die off. And it's happening. They should admit. They should say, look, we made a mistake. Here's what happened, and we want to clear the record, clean it up, clean their conscience. That's what should be done. But who hell ever wants to clear anyone's conscience? They never worry about that. Disgusting. What do we got now? Is that the theater? Oh, theater's hot. Theater's hot.
Oh.
Well, I was going to go and watch. Seems to have drifted away, haven't they?
and for the JFK Lancer Conference.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay. Will we find out the truth ever?
Yes, absolutely.
How much longer?
Well,
I asked you this 5 years ago.
Yeah, well, we're going to be much closer 5 years from now than we are now. If the same progress is made, the country's going to start seeing this as a coup. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Listen.
Of it when you purchase one of the books. The books are $10.
I know, it's a
get that for 15.
contradiction in
You can get
terms.
both of them for 25.
Okay.
This is for history.
Oh.
Hi everybody, it's according to my watch, it's November 22nd, 1963. No, 1998. 35 years already. My goodness, how time flies when you're having fun. 35 years, well over a third of a century, and we still don't know the truth. Hopefully by the 36th we will. Certainly hopefully by the next century. And that's only the same year, isn't it? Anyway, it's Robert Groden here from Dealey Plaza, and let's hope that we do find the truth soon. Gee, where's somebody, a friend of mine, a long time ago said, may all the truth be known soon. It's not soon enough, but hopefully we will soon.
Yes,
And thank you very much.
Did you want
So, bye.
Plaza. This is a study of frame by frame study of every.
Okay. Good morning, Mike. I'm Carrie McCarthy, and today is November 22nd, 1998. Thank you for asking if you may videotape me. It's an important day for me. My grandmother, Loretta Kennedy Connolly, was Ambassador Joseph P. Kennedy's sister, which made her the aunt and godmother of John F. Kennedy. So we come to Dallas this weekend to celebrate his life, not to mourn him, but rather to hope soon justice will be had in the case of his murder, but simply to remember him. And I thank you, Mike, for asking me to do this.
Thank you.
That's what's happened today. These are the men. The deaths are up here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And here are the people that are associated with those deaths. Reagan, GCW, is a death, of course. And Dwight Eisenhower here. These are These are James Lee. Wait a minute. I forgot.
Johnson over here.
What the hell are these? Eisenhower, Kennedy, Nixon. Oh, these are presidents. These are presidents that were. How the hell are they connected? I've got to find out. I don't understand that myself right this minute. These are, of course, these are all the assassins.
Right.
Yeah. And RWR is just he's a patsy. Well, these are patsies. That's what these are. All of them patsies. And RWR becomes a patsy in relationship to the, and GCW, of course, that's Wallace. And we haven't got Malcolm X. Malcolm X should be a little one like that, somewhere in there. Malcolm X should be put in, probably right up in here. He was 1963, 4. I can't remember Malcolm X. He's somewhere in there. He's before RFK and MLK. What the hell are these guys doing? I can't figure it out now myself.
And that's what I was presenting when I looked at it. It says, with the tree you have.
That's right. Well, we didn't try and make this was a sort of a work of art. In other words, you don't have to explain every damn thing.
See, to me, the Earth would be these guys.
The roof, they're all obvious.
And actually, the Earth's out here. And then up here, you'd have all your presidents, and you'd have your
people who actually played a role in making the street grow up.
Right. They came from this groups.
Yeah, these
Yeah.
groups down here. And then you come up into the actual assassination.
There's the deaths, yes. And here are the patsies. But for the life of me, Bush, Carter, Nixon, Johnson, it's just all the, maybe it's the time element, but I can't imagine why it's like that. There's a perfectly good reason, by the way.
Well, and maybe that this whole thing is just, this is the war machine right here, and these are the different factors of it. And some of these cases, they're actually the results of the war machine, or the things that went into making it the power that it is.
Maybe this is the war machine. This is where the war machine started. Now these guys were still keeping it going, but certainly Reagan kept it going like crazy. I don't know. Damn, that's funny. I've got Tom. I've forgotten it. There's a great story about this. I made a sketch that looks something like this, and I just gave it to Brandy. I got her name's in here somewhere. Where the hell is she?
That's not her.
That's me.
Okay.
Jake, I got Brandy to put her initials somewhere. Well, maybe she wouldn't do it. Maybe she didn't do it. She made me do it. Good fun, anyway. Great.
What is the firm index?
The what? Firm index? That was a branch of a company that was in Switzerland, and they had a bunch of guys that they trained as they had an assassination group, and they trained them. And finally, the Swiss found out that what the hell they were doing. It was a front, and they threw them out, and they went to, I think they went either to South Africa or I think they went into South Africa. South Africa or South America, I forgot. South Africa, I think. They were, that was with the World Trade Center.
Oh, okay.
And this was part of the World Trade that comes, something, can you say it in Italian?
No. No.
Anyway, that's what it was. And then, of course, Clay Shaw was the head of the World Trade Center in New Orleans. Oh. So it grew, that whole relationship grew out of this damned outfit.
Now the JBS.
John Birch Society. And you know, they have been very lucky. Very lucky. Nobody's said anything much about them. Oh boy, were they in the middle of it. You know, they raised a lot of dough. They helped train the group when they were down in Mexico before they moved up here. They were training in Mexico. You know, Executive Action shows a bunch of guys training.
Yeah.
You have seen that? I've seen that movie. It's a good movie. Yeah. And they show a bunch of guys training with a car going away, and then they shoot at it and everything. And that was John Birch Society.
Do you think that the Klan and the skinheads and people like that they're part of this too?
That's what it is?
Like the Ku Klux Klan or the skinheads?
Now, not the Klan. We got the mob.
Yeah.
There's the mob. Yeah. But they were in bed with the CIA, of course.
No.
And of course, that's the FBI. And that's J. Hoover.
Yeah. Of course, there might have been some John Birchers that were KKK.
Right.
And we had the National Security Council, because it was run through the National Security Council and NSA and the National Security Agency. For God's sake, without that, you'd never have known that KA-007 was effective as a bomb. Oh, they knew exactly where it was going.
All right.
We've got to get in. We've got a few sound. We've got to bring up KA-007 pretty damn soon again. It's necessary. That would be boy, now that we've gotten rid of some of these guys, we could bring it up. It's too bad Reagan is in that, and has that Alzheimer's. I'd like to be able to attack him, but you can't attack him with Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
Well, he wasn't, you know, he was really a perfect party as a president. Oh, no, that isn't it. I was thinking, you know, that all the presidents have been nothing other than puppets. That may be what we're talking about. That may be. They started with Dwight Eisenhower, and he was playing golf and all that. And that's when they really got the military and never disbanded. That's when they really became powerful. I hate the word, but they were in on all the decisions of the Oval Office. They were still there. I mean, you know. And with JFK off to the right, he didn't pay any attention to him. He never talked to the CIA. He didn't believe the whole thing. Mad as hell. He was after JFK. 5 fellas. And then these guys, this is the perfect puppet. And RMN, JEC did quite well for a while. Carter. Yeah, he really did very well. And then by golly, what they did was they trapped Andy Young. They mousetrapped Andy Young, who was he was the United Nations ambassador. And they tripped him up somewhere, and he had to get out. And then there was somebody else. And finally Carter gave in. He just said, it's all right. What the hell? The war machine wins. And Bush was marvelous. Bush and Reagan were perfect. Professional war machine loves the media, and the media vice versa. That's what it is, but you might have to put something like over there, something over there that would say is patsies, and something over here that would say puppets, and you might have to say something over here, victims. I don't know how, but I think it's a marvelous thing. Brandy took the sketch and just started. There it is. And then we put the names in, of course. But she did such a